Great. Well, let's go ahead and get started. I appreciate coming out today to the WAMIT conference. My name is Joe Holbrook. I'm the owner of an e-learning platform called myblockchainexperts.com. I'm also a certified blockchain expert and a Bitcoin professional as well. Now, what we're going to talk about here is really distinguish the difference between cryptocurrencies and the blockchain. Now, first, the disclosure. I can't give financial advice, and we're not going to do that. The focus of this is really around the technology. So how many here are students? We've got 1, 2, 3. Okay, excellent. Excellent. 4. Okay, great. And when it comes to looking at a career path, what you may want to do, what technologies you could really get ahead, and sort of what I call, basically, be the first across the finish line. And blockchain is where it's at right now. If you looked at LinkedIn last year, there's about 200 job openings for blockchain developers in the US. You look now, there's over 1,200 or 1,300. So that's 1 year, it's literally exponentially grew out of control. Now, now just a couple things too I wanted before I get too off of the topic. Now, when we talk about the blockchain, I'm going to basically talk about what cryptocurrency is first, and then we'll talk about what the blockchain is, because there's a lot of confusion out there. If you read CNBC, you'll get two different definitions a lot of the times, but this is actually a very different subject area. When it comes to the blockchain, this is what enterprises are looking at, and it's a distributed ledger of trust. So this is a big deal. Let's go ahead and talk about what the blockchain is, what cryptocurrency is, and then we'll talk about why you want to understand what the blockchain is, why it's the next revolution in IT that you haven't heard of yet. It's just getting started. And then we'll talk about careers, where you could take your career with the blockchain. So quick introduction, Joe Holbrook, based here in Jacksonville, Florida. I lived here about 3 years. And before that, I was in DC for about 10 years. I've worked for a lot of different vendors and consulted with a lot of government agencies and financial agencies as well. And so I've mainly done a lot of cloud architecture. My latest foray the last few years has been blockchain consulting. Enterprises are looking at the blockchain, and I'm going to say that again because I think this is where the jobs are going to be, especially if you're a developer or an architect. So if you're looking at developing or architecting enterprises, networks, data architectures, cloud computing, this is an area you got to know about. I'm also a published author. If you go to LinkedIn, I've got numerous courses on there with LinkedIn and many other organizations. I've spoken at a lot of other conferences as well. So let's talk about blockchain or crypto. Okay, who here right now has any cryptocurrencies? Anybody? Any Bitcoin, Litecoin, nothing? Monero? Okay. And that's okay. When it comes to enterprises, does anyone know a company that is looking at the blockchain? Curious. No one. Okay. And that's what I would expect, because I was going to bring this up later, but just as a second thought, in Jacksonville, I looked to see how many blockchain roles there were in Jacksonville. 0. Most of the roles right now are going to be in the big cities. They're going to be, matter of fact, Miami for some reason has like 40 or 50 roles. I was surprised. But New York, DC, San Jose, London, I mean, this is where right now, and what will happen is these roles are going to spread out throughout the country. Now, we're going to cover just a little tidbit of this, but what I want to point out here, on this slide here, you could see that this is Web 2.0. This is your cloud computing. This is your security as a service. This is your platform as a service. This is your cloud computing, essentially. And now what we're seeing is, we're seeing a lot of organizations go, instead of using like PayPal, they're starting to consider Bitcoin or Litecoin. One that has really taken off is Dash as well, and Monero. But we'll talk about how this is changing the scope of IT right now. One of the things that I've ran into is a lot of financials right now, and any bank that you could think of is looking at the blockchain. They want to streamline their processes. A lot of government organizations are looking at this. So just to give you the scope, this is a big deal. This is really coming down the tracks in IT. And I was just talking to a large college up in Boston that is going to have their own blockchain development program. We're talking 2 years of blockchain, Hyperledger, and all these other cool technologies I'm going to touch on. Now, hold on. Okay. So why the blockchain? Who is using it? So here's a chart I got from Business Intelligence, BI Intelligence. Banks, the number one stakeholder right now in the blockchain is going to be the banks. And the reason is, banks have this little tendency to get ahead of the technology curve if there's efficiencies involved. Secondly, cryptocurrencies are eating a lot of their business, but they don't want to admit it. So that's why you hear a lot of talk about the banks calling it, frauds and all this, but we'll talk more about that in a second. But right now, you could see that 51% already right now are planning commercial use of the blockchain. Could be for real estate transactions. Could be for sending money overseas. For right now, Ripple. Anybody hear of Ripple? Okay. Now, Ripple is an interesting blockchain. It's not totally a blockchain because it's a private blockchain. You don't really per se have miners. It's a little different. It's a consortium of banks. They've already taken it, and they're using it for international settlements and a lot of other use cases that I'm seeing. Now, when it comes to cryptocurrency, I just want to clarify what it is. A cryptocurrency, a digital currency, not secured really by any kind of Federal Reserve backing or anything, but it's basically secured by cryptography. And that's another area in itself that there's a lot of demand for too. And if you have questions on that, just speak after the session. Now, these currencies are mined. For example, when a Bitcoin miner, sticks their mining rig on the blockchain for Bitcoin, they get rewarded for producing that solution, essentially. The blockchain is a race, essentially, to solve a problem. And if you have 2,000 miners, only one miner can solve that problem, can send that transaction and get rewarded for that. And again, it's printed. They're not printed, but they're mined. It's considered digital gold or silver. Bitcoin is considered digital gold. Litecoin, other altcoins are considered digital silver. Now, Bitcoin is, of course, the most widely used with the largest market cap. So some of the examples of cryptocurrency: Bitcoin, Litecoin, Monero, Dash. If you have any questions on specific ones, just speak up. Just let me know. Now, Ether is interesting because Ether is essentially the token for using the Ethereum blockchain. Anybody hear of Ethereum? Okay, great. That's number one. That's the number one blockchain that is in use. And if you're a developer, you want to know what it is because, again, especially if you work for any of these banks downtown, trust me, they're looking at it.
You said it's the number one blockchain. So is that referring to the cryptography that's used to associate the blocks? Or?
That's the platform, essentially. And as far as like the cryptography, we could talk about the different hashes that are out there, and that's another discussion. I'm happy to talk about it after. But correct. So all the blockchains basically each of these altcoins and blockchains, like Ripple, they have their own cryptography in the back end that's running on the blockchain. And it could be anything from SHA 256 to a number of other cryptography solutions out there. Yeah. So definitely a good question. And to be honest, there's thousands more. So if you go to coinmarketcap.com, there's approximately 1,400 that they list, and there's probably another 2,000 that aren't officially listed yet. So a ton of opportunity there. Now, when it comes to Bitcoin, Bitcoin was created by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2009. Now, no one really knows who this person is. There's a lot of rumors that, it was, put out there by the intelligence agencies, and, no one really knows the real story. It's really hard to tell. But the fact is that this white paper was put out during the financial crisis. Remember, if anybody remembers 2008, right? It was really a challenging time. And apparently some visionaries, really thought that wouldn't it be nice to make a transaction without a bank being involved, right? I'm all for that. Every time you use your debit or credit card, you're making someone else rich, is what you're doing. And the fact is that the cost to do that is really, really, excessive, to be honest. Because for every transaction on the Visa network, do you know what it costs Visa to do that? It's about 6 cents on a bad day. And they're charging, if you do a $100 transaction, that's $3. That's a heck of a profit, right? So anyways, that's just one example. Bitcoin has a fork called Bitcoin Cash. If you have questions on any of specific forks, just talk to me after. It's known as crypto gold. Okay, now this guy here, anybody know who he is? Right? Jimmy Diamond, right? From Chase, JP Morgan Chase, right? Well, basically, he calls it a fraud. He thinks Bitcoin's a fraud. And he says if you're stupid enough to buy it, you'll pay the price for it one day. However, what was sort of funny is his, he regretted to say that, because what happened was he had some back-end bankers in the back end trading Bitcoin like full time. So there's a little bit more to the story there. But the fact, what I'm trying to put across, the blockchain is there. And here's what he says about the blockchain. The blockchain is real. They're a big buy-in into Ripple. They're a major stakeholder. And they're also implementing other enterprise blockchains as well. So it's out there. It's real. It's being adopted. It's implemented. It's definitely a good area to focus on. If you go to coin, sorry about that. Let me go back here. Okay. If you go to coinmarketcap.com, you can see all the, altcoins here. There it is. I don't know if you can see that. Okay. All the different altcoins. Bitcoin is number one that was as of like 2 days ago. Ethereum. Now, a lot of people get confused between Ethereum and Bitcoin, and does it use the same blockchain? Totally different blockchains. Now, what's an ICO? That's an initial coin offering. That's basically when the founders of an altcoin decide to raise money. It's very similar to an IPO without all the regulations, basically. So what is a blockchain? A blockchain is a cryptographically secure shared distributed ledger. I like to call the blockchain a platform. For example, for cryptocurrencies to be able to work, they need a platform to work on. Sort of like telephone. If you're going to make a call, you need a telephone network, a cellular network, or plain old POTS network, right? Plain old telephone systems. So you need to have that network to be able to make that call. These are immutable transactions, and they're written on this distributed ledger. Now, immutable. Anybody hear of that word? What does that mean? Anybody? You're going to try?
It means it can't be changed.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. So when you write something, it can't be modified, deleted, sort of like an Enron email, if anybody was a lucky Enron investor. You know, and this is a good thing because a lot of the challenges when you have an intermediary, that intermediary you have to trust. With the blockchain, you're trusting a bunch of nodes, a bunch of distributed computers. And for that transaction to go through, all the miners have to agree that that's a real transaction. So this is a revolutionary way of thinking. Now, this is transformational technology. Like I had sort of made the point, the banks are already full-blown into this, and they like it for several reasons. It allows them to optimize their operations, increase profits, and they do that in numerous ways. You know, they reduce their technology footprint. They also reduce their staff. So for example, I like to call, you know, again, the blockchain the great sort of cost reducer, and that's really what it is. And again, you know, if you think about it, if you used to have 17 people in your regulatory department, and there was a bank that I was consulting with that does, and that's a small bank in Polk County, and if they go to a technology like this, they could get it down to 1 or 2 people. So if you can reduce your overhead, that's what the bank's like. And government's already looking at it. For example, United Nations is a big buy-in, World Health Organization, the World Bank. So it's real. Now, when it comes to the blockchain, it's a decentralized database is what it really is. It's a ledger. And so if you work with databases, this is going to be a natural progression. So if you already know SQL, if you already know Oracle, right? Or if you're doing any kind of other big data services like Hadoop, this is all going to be fairly simple from a technology standpoint to understand. Now, when it comes to a blockchain, I like to sort of put it like this. A blockchain is a book. And in that book are pages. And for you to write to that book, you have to do what? You have to write that transaction. It's like a ledger, right? And that entry is a blockchain transaction. So think of the blockchain as a book that can be written to, but you can't erase it, or should also say modify it as well. Blockchains can be private or public. For example, Ethereum is a very well-known, well-adopted public blockchain. And you've got other blockchains out there like multi-chain, which you could deploy on AWS for an enterprise, for example. That could be a private blockchain. So let's go ahead and just talk briefly about how this, what I did there. I know I skimmed ahead there. Okay, there we are. Okay. I know what I did. Oops. Okay, let's compare. Oh, damn it. Hold on. Okay. Now, so let's compare cryptocurrency to a blockchain. A blockchain is a digital currency secured with cryptography, whereas a blockchain is what? It's a ledger. It's a book. You're going to mine cryptocurrencies. On the other hand, again, a blockchain is a book. It's a distributed ledger. And again, there's a lot of other things to talk about, but the blockchain I like to just sort of highlight. This is a revolutionary way of implementing trust into a platform, right? Any questions? What's the difference? So blockchain is a platform. Cryptos like Bitcoin use the blockchain. Blockchain is the enabler, right? And then cryptocurrencies use technology. Bitcoin is the first software-based token for the blockchain. When we talk about Bitcoin, again, Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer cryptocurrency. It uses the peer-to-peer platform, which is the blockchain, right? Ethereum is a platform, right? Think of Ethereum as a platform, and Ether is the token. Let's talk about careers. What can you do as an IT professional to get ahead and learn new technologies that are in demand and will be in higher demand later? Blockchain expertise is developed through various methods, and there's no real clear path as of right now. Blockchain training is informal, but more higher education is really being focused around, like I just mentioned. I was talking to a college up in the Boston area that's looking at a blockchain program. So this we're going to see a lot more of. Programmers will do very well. So if you're already developing, you've got a head start. And like I said, I could show you right now plenty of roles that are going to really probably give you a good career boost in a lot of different ways. But some of those, so basically one of the questions I get is, what are the real languages that the blockchain uses? You want to focus on Evergreen, C++, for example, JavaScript, PHP, Ruby on Rails, Python, and Solidity. Now, Solidity, a lot of people may not have heard of that. That is the Ethereum development language. And that was developed specifically for Ethereum. And my thought is, if you're already doing some of this programming already, you already can do the blockchain. There's no technological sort of capability you have to really gain other than understanding perhaps how the ledger works and some of the coding requirements. But other than that, it's a pretty simple transition. So what about your next job or what you may want to look at, careers in the blockchain? Here's some of the roles that I see. I know every week I post, actually every 2 weeks, I post the demand requirements that I receive. Now, 2 years ago, it was all cloud computing. Now, it's all blockchain. A lot of demand for blockchain. And my thought is, in about another 2 years, once you see that transition, if you remember that chart, 2018 to 20, we're going to see that spike in demand really happen. So if you're a developer, a good start. Blockchain architect, blockchain pre-sales and sales, marketing in the blockchain, a blockchain trainer as well. A LinkedIn search actually shows over 1,700 roles right now. That was as of yesterday. A big change from last year where I saw a couple hundred. Now, I don't know about you, but 200 to 1,700 is a significant percentage. So definitely consider looking at it. Now, here's an example of some of the roles that I was looking at yesterday. And this is just the US. So if you add in London, like London has a lot of requirements. Singapore, for example. Asia actually is a bigger market than the US for this, actually, believe it or not. So if you want to move to Singapore, this might be a good opportunity to find a technology that can get you there. So blockchain consultant, solution engineers, right? Developers. Now you notice this, right? Senior iOS. What's iOS? Apple. Interesting, right? So interesting requirements out there, a lot of great opportunities. Here are some resources for you to also take a look at. Now, I would recommend, if you're looking at getting practice on developing, there's a ton of free resources out there. Microsoft, if you're into any kind of Java or you're into .NET or anything of that nature, they've got tons of resources. IBM also has resources as well. AWS, not so much. You really have to go through a partner to get that capability. And then our website as well. And then MIT as well, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. also has some really good resources that they're starting to put out now. And then Hyperledger, I encourage you to look at Hyperledger because I think that's really where it's going to be. And let's see, I think this is the last slide. Thank you for attending. And is there any questions?
So what is a, I'm sorry, the architect as opposed to a developer?
Okay, good question. And that really depends on the company. Now, generally, an architect's going to be doing the designing, could be the front end or the back end. The developer is going to be the coding, more or less, like putting in the programs together. For example, integrating the blockchain, integrating the cryptocurrencies, integrating the transaction overhead or anything of that nature. So that's, again, like I showed you that list on LinkedIn. The requirements are not really clearly going to be defined because, for example, you can look at Chase, what they have listed, and you look at what Citibank has, you're going to have totally different requirements. Some want you to be able to use Visio. Some don't care if you use Visio. Some want you to have PHP. Some don't care if you do. So the requirements are going to be all over the map. So I encourage you just to go to LinkedIn and look at the different roles and figure out maybe where you might fit in. That would be the best sort of option.
And you said it was relevant, related to database type.
Oh, absolutely.
How can you elaborate on that?
So the ledger is a distributed database. And one of the challenges with a typical database is that they don't scale well. So basically you could scale a database, vertically, horizontally, right? SQL, for example, does that scale vertically or horizontally? What do you think?
Probably horizontally, because if it gets longer, it takes.
Yeah, actually, it would be vertical.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you're going to add resources. Now, you could do Oracle Rack, and you could use other. So when you scale horizontally, what that means typically is that you're going to add nodes, whereas vertically, when you're going to add resources. So generally. Now, that's a little different in the cloud. Like, for example, Google Cloud, AWS, they have a little bit more capability to scale horizontally. So you could scale between regions, for example. But generally, when you're thinking about databases, think of the ledger as a distributed database. You can write to it, but you can't go back and perform a SQL routine and delete or modify that. It's immutable. Just remember that. So, good. Any other questions? Okay. Well, feel free to stay after. I'll be happy to walk you through a few things. Well, thank you so much for attending. All right. Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Hey, my pleasure, man.